Yesterday was a big day.
What happened yesterday?
Yesterday, we saw The Rise of Skywalker. It was the release of The Rise of Skywalker. And it was a big day for Star Wars fans. And today, we've been talking about this movie since we saw it last night, and we just wanted to capture some of our thoughts on camera. Consensus from me and Aaron is...
Amazing!
We loved it! It was so good! Like, so good! Okay, so let's dive in. Let's discuss, shall we? Let's talk about The Rise of Skywalker. So before we begin, I want to preface, absolutely spoiler-filled video ahead. Do not watch this if you haven't seen. I don't want anyone that hasn't seen this to watch this video and then be mad that they watched this video, because I will talk about the movie in this. You know me. All my friends and family know I am the biggest anti-spoiler person. I will hurt a human if they spoil a movie for me. Not physically, but I will.
Emotionally better.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that being said, if you have not seen The Rise of Skywalker, please do not watch this video unless you're into that spoilery type of stuff, but don't. This really isn't a review, just so everyone's aware. We're not critics. We're not. And we're easily pleased. So this is really just going to be mostly sort of a...
Takeaways,
an overview, a recap, if you will, and just kind of our reactions to stuff that was in the movie. So... buckle up, hop in the Millennium Falcon, here we go. First things first, I guess we could talk a teensy little bit about The Last Jedi. Just because it was such a divisive movie in the fandom, and we didn't have a channel or do vlogs when that movie came out, so won't obviously go super into detail about it, but just kind of wanted to touch on some things that I took away from seeing The Last Jedi, and Aaron took away, just to kind of set the tone for what we were walking into. Aaron and I are both really big Star Wars fans. And by fan, I mean fan. I guess some people think that the word fan means you have to absolutely love everything about your fandom, and some people think it gives them an entitlement to really say some negative things about their fandom. And I am really in the middle. I fully support Star Wars as a fandom. We both do. But we're also there for entertainment. We value what Star Wars brings to our lives, and so far there is nothing in a movie that I've seen in my life that has hindered my ability to continue my life. So I guess that's just kind of where we left off. So you can kind of talk about it, but we loved The Last Jedi. We thoroughly loved that film. But Aaron has some really good insights on the way that a super fan might have seen The Last Jedi. You hit the nail on the head last night with what you said, if you want to.
Well, yeah, just to start, I've always been a fan of Star Wars as a genre, not as a saga. There are certain tenets that make Star Wars films, and anything else that's canon or the extended lore. It uses certain characteristics that makes it what it is. If you don't like those things, that's okay. That just means that you don't like that genre, and not every genre is for everyone. There are then those who say that they like the genre and then insist on picking it apart. That's okay too if you like picking things apart. I happen to not be that type of fan of this genre, but I really appreciate what Star Wars is creatively. I really appreciate what it does for me from a nostalgia perspective. I grew up watching these movies. It's kind of the babysitter's babysitter. You could just put a Star Wars VHS in the machine and I would just be attached to a TV for 2.5 hours. And it was perfect.
Well, and I think the line that Aaron said last night that really struck me about The Last Jedi in particular is, so The Force Awakens, a lot of people said, was kind of fan servicey and was just kind of giving us all the hits of Star Wars that we wanted to see again or relive, and I can kind of get on board with that. I do think it was a beautiful film. The Last Jedi, though, was like the polar opposite. It was like, oh, you're a Star Wars fan? Guess what? This fandom is not what you think it is. And I have talked about that movie till I am blue in the face. I fully support all of the really crazy decisions that Rian Johnson made. For The Last Jedi, I think it was vastly, deeply needed in the fandom. That being said, it did create a rift. But the thing about The Last Jedi that Aaron said last night, in comparison to The Rise of Skywalker, was he said, nothing in The Rise of Skywalker took me out of the movie, but The Last Jedi, there were moments that took me out of the movie. Yeah. And I think that's what was some of the criticisms that I did agree with about The Last Jedi, was that there were moments where I was like, oh, that's really hard to get on board with. And not because it was an outlandish idea, but because the way it was executed. We all can talk about Space Leia. Like, that seemed still to me, even though I just rewatched The Last Jedi this morning, and as I was watching it, I was like, you know what? Like, I actually really appreciate some of this a lot more. That scene still sticks out to me as kind of being a little too wonky and
it's
not
jarring.
Yeah, and not because it was like, to me, it's not because they made the decision to do something drastic, but because the way it was executed was just so. Like, I mean, the scene right before she's doing, like, Superman Space Leia, her, like, hand, like, pulses in the Force. You can see all the little particles in space. That was a beautiful shot. And it's like, if the idea is that she's alive. Anyway, we're going down a rabbit hole. All I wanted to say was that we came away from The Last Jedi very much, like, I personally especially had this conversation with so many people. It made me love the Star Wars fandom 10 times more, because it made me value the characters and see different sides of them that, you know, playing it the safe way might not have ever gotten us.
Yeah. There's like this meta commentary throughout The Last Jedi that says that being a Star Wars fan doesn't matter. And I think that's, whether people realize it or not, that's what upset them the most. And it was some of those moments that took you out of the film, and then you sort of like reflect on yourself. I like the escapism aspect of space fantasy. And if you are thrust back into reality, even for a short moment, like, that's a little jarring. It's a little bit of a bummer. I even had conversations at work today about others who were talking about The Last Jedi compared to Rise of Skywalker, and they were talking about still all their complaints from from Episode 8. You know, oh, Yoda wouldn't have done this. Oh, Luke wouldn't act like this. That's not in their character. That's not this. That's not that. That's not for them to choose. It's really not.
Yeah.
It's these moments that that challenge you, that maybe are for the better. I don't know. And then we do have kind of like the swing of the pendulum to the one side of, like, very predictable. Episode 7 is kind of like the greatest hits album of Star Wars, where, you know, the first act is A New Hope, the second act is Empire Strikes Back, and the third act is Return of the Jedi. I thought that was awesome. I don't think that there's a better way to reboot Star Wars than that. There are better ways to make Star Wars films. That's been proven. But there's not a better way to relaunch the series than that, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, kind of tying into what Aaron said, the way that these films were modeled are very much in the style of the first trilogy, in terms of the first one was the first one, the second one was such a departure from the first one, and the third one kind of brought back that first piece. So now we're going to dive into The Rise of Skywalker. So truly, again, another spoiler warning. If you have not seen this movie, please do not watch this unless you really want spoilers. But if you have seen this movie, buckle up, listen, just pay attention. I have stuff to say. Okay. So let's start with our criticisms, only because we have fewer criticisms than we have things that we absolutely adored about this movie. Now, full disclosure, we did see it last night, opening night, one time. We are going to see it again in theaters very soon this weekend, because we want to give it another watch through. So this is just literally our first impressions. We have had less than 24 hours to think about what we've seen. Both of us did like a very targeted choice to avoid a lot of articles or reading about the movie too much. We've read a couple things, like we wanted to know about some of the cameos.
I didn't even get to read that yet.
Okay.
The only thing that I've read is an article that says that The Rise of Skywalker is the worst film in film history.
God.
It was so entertaining to read.
What a
so
life that
entertaining
person
to
must
read.
live. So criticisms. Aaron, what was something that you did not like about The Rise of Skywalker?
There was never a impending sense of doom from like the the sort of like Death Star role or Star Killer base role, and in this case it was like the fleet. There was never like that much of an impending sense of like we are doomed. They gave you, I think, 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds of like maybe a hint at that there are some stakes that the rebellion could lose, or the resistance I should say could lose, and that was really about it. And then Lando and the Lando comes in to save the day with the cavalry, which is fantastic. I think I would have appreciated a little bit more like being emotionally toyed with slightly more, maybe even just 10 seconds more. The comparison that I would give is like the sort of false death of Chewie that they give. I think that they did that in the right way, where they...
It's interesting. I've talked to a few people that really hated that.
Really?
Today, yeah.
Oh.
I talked to a few of my coworkers about Chewie's like, he's dead, and then 5 minutes later we find out he's alive, but they don't find out till, like, the characters don't find out till later. And people said that they felt like it was so cheesy and like not needed, and they didn't like it. And I was like, but I felt like it was done well.
I appreciate it just because it's a little bit of a departure. You have some dramatic choices with the audience not knowing, and then the audience knowing, characters not knowing. The characters are still making these decisions based in something, and then they're like, oh, let's do the breakout mission. Great. Mm-hmm. We've seen the breakout mission before. Now we're back into familiarity.
Yeah. So going along with what you said about this, like, I guess not having high enough stakes, is that what you would say? Or just not feeling the danger?
Yeah, I think just not feeling how impending, how terrible. They wreck one planet. You don't really recognize or appreciate who's on it or what's going on, as opposed to The Force Awakens, where they did like close-ups of all the citizens of the planets that are being destroyed by Starkiller Base at the time it was being destroyed. Mm-hmm. I appreciated that for whatever morbid value that has.
Yeah. Okay, well, going along with that, I guess the biggest criticism I have, or I have two really, really big criticisms and then smaller little ones, none of which take me out of the film and none of which make me like the film any less. But my biggest criticism, kind of along those lines, is that, and I feel like everyone has this general consensus, is that it was kind of messy. It was kind of like the plot, the timing, the pacing of the movie was very like boom, 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 boom. And it was like, okay, wait. And it's like they're on one mission, now they're on another mission, they find out this one thing, and now this one person and this. And it just was like, we didn't really get to absorb a lot of what was happening before we were already on to another piece of the story. And so, I mean, we talked about MacGuffins last night, literally, as we were walking into the movie, and it was very much the MacGuffin just kept being more MacGuffins and more things to find and more people to learn from, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think especially in a Star Wars movie, it's a very common practice. Like a lot of especially like the earlier Star Wars films, you meet characters that like don't have any purpose except to be in a scene, and like, but they became like characters that are well known. Mm-hmm.
Some surprisingly.
Yeah. And so it's like the whole point of bringing all these things into the story, I think actually is a really good thing to do. It's, how do I say this? The general idea of having so many different places to go and people to see and things to obtain and paths to forge is good. I just think that sometimes there were moments where I was like, Chewie's fake death is an example. I was like, I literally had like a moment. They got me for like probably like 30 seconds. I was like, I grabbed Aaron's leg and I was like, did Chewie just die? And I had a little gasp. And then you find out he's okay. But then I was immediately like, well, wait, there wasn't another transport, because they like write it off as like, oh, it's another transport. And I was like, but there wasn't another transport. But then it was like on to the next thing. And I was like, okay, well, that's fine. I don't need to like worry about that. It's a movie. It's escapism. But it was also just very, very quick. Yeah. And
so they search for the blade, which they don't really know what they're searching for, except that it's an artifact that will lead them to the next thing.
Yeah.
So they search for the blade. They get the blade. The blade has the coordinates that C-3PO is able to decipher, but then they
still need the Wayfinder.
Well, they need to hack C-3PO.
Yeah.
And then they get the location of the Wayfinder, then they get the location of the Wayfinder, then they need to get to it, then they need to get it, and then they need to go to the place that takes them to.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's like 4 or 5 unique stops. And to our benefit as viewers, that's a lot of opportunity to introduce the people that we already know and love, and then to introduce new characters, because there's a whole bunch of settings that you get as a result of that plot function.
Yeah.
The downside being, you kind of do the plot version of Lightspeed jumping.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's how I likened it to someone today when I was talking to them. It was like they literally Lightspeed jumped through the story a lot. So I think that was just my biggest complaint, and again, not enough for it to ruin the movie for me in the slightest, but it was just something I recognized as being, especially in comparison to after watching The Last Jedi today. The Last Jedi was a very slow moving movie. You had like 2 things happening. You had Rey trying to get Luke Skywalker to be her master, and you had the Resistance trying to outrun the First Order. That was it. Those are the only 2 things. And then the Canto Bite thing, but that still plays into getting the Master Code Breaker and all of that. So it's like, but there were 2 main pieces to the story happening, and that just, with little strings attached here and there. This movie was like 6 main things happening with a ton of people involved. Like, okay, for instance, General Hux being the spy. They lay the foundation at the very beginning. There's a spy in the First Order, and you're kind of like, ooh, that's going to be a big deal. And then it ends up being like not a big deal at all, and Hux gets killed, which like that also was kind of silly to me, but I enjoyed it. I did. But it was just kind of like, it was like every time I thought something was going to be something that we would really focus on in the plot, we moved on to the next thing. So I guess that was just my other biggest criticism. I'm just going to get this out of the way right now.
Well, and just to talk about speed before you go to that, it was a 2 hour and 20 minute movie. Like, they had room to stretch it a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's been proven in this day and age that you can have a 3-hour finale of a series in game, and people will watch every millisecond of it enthralled.
Multiple times.
So it's not as if they couldn't extend it out further. I'm sure that there were creative decisions as to why, and balance and all these things. Like, these editors are the best editors in the business. J.J. Abrams has done a few successful projects, so he's okay. But they had room to make it longer if they had truly wanted.
Yeah.
I guess that's one thing that I would question on pacing, is like why they chose that speed. It might be in contrast to The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
That might just be it.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess too, going along with that, I did feel a little bit of when you talk about the pacing of the movie, a little bit of that like retcon. We got to make sure that we brush over this really quickly so we can move on with what we want to say about it. There were moments where I was like they retconned a lot of stuff, and which the biggest thing though, I'm trying to stick to criticisms, but talking about retconning, one of the things they retconned that I thought was brilliant, and I just want to touch on it, but we will talk about it in the things that we loved because we discussed this, is that they gave Leia a much more fleshed out story. I think it's so unfortunate that it took us 9 movies to technically not including the prequels, 6 movies to get to a point where we can really talk about Leia's Force abilities and Leia's her lightsaber. She's a lightsaber, and like to talk about all those things that should have been discussed in the first trilogy. But I think that is something that was unfortunate. The retconning of a lot of things, I guess not unfortunate, but was noticeable at some times about the retconning of a lot of the stuff from The Last Jedi, to try and be like, oh, well, fans didn't like that, we're going to brush over it, we're going to move on. But I think it did do service to some things in that it provided us context for characters and storylines and things that should have been discussed already, and I at least appreciate that JJ was willing to give them the opportunity to have those as part of their canon.
Do you think if they had a fleshed out Jedi trained Leia in, say, Return of the Jedi, or some imaginary sequel that wasn't Episode 7, do you think we would have gotten Rey? Because I think they would have just probably continued on with Leia.
My brain's not ready to answer that big of a question.
Because I think that...
I don't know. I feel like if we had gotten Leia as a Jedi in some film form, I think we still would have gotten someone like Rey, because if the story continued. But, like, the thing is that the reason that didn't happen, and the reason that they fleshed it out in such a side story way, is because Leia was always meant to be General Organa. She was always meant to lead. Yeah. She was always meant to be a like, resistance, rebellion, like, leader and fighter, and she was always meant to be that person, and that's who she wanted to be.
And she comes from politicians.
Yeah,
the
so
Organas in general.
I think that's why her story didn't go that way. And if it had gone that way, we don't know what would have happened with the Resistance, truly. So there's a whole can of worms there. But that's a great question. This is a conversation we'll have off camera.
Okay.
I liked it a lot. Thank you for asking that. Okay, one of my other biggest criticisms, which I kind of already mentioned, or kind of, anyway. I think that they did a great disservice to Kelly Marie Tran's character, Rose. I think that The Last Jedi, people were awful to her, chased her off of social media. The rabid fans that were just bullying her and treating her like crap. Literally, in my eyes, because her role was so diminished in this movie, they got their way. They chased her off screen. Yep. A character that could have been really dynamic and really seen a lot of growth in this movie, I think was not given the opportunity to grow and was kind of like pigeonholed, side cast. I mean, even like...
It's the Jar Jar treatment.
And it's so frustrating because it's like, her story was so unique. Like, her sister died, like, saved herself, or sacrificed herself, like, for the Resistance, and she was, like, trying to make good on her sister, like, talked about her sister all the time. She did so many things in The Last Jedi. She saved Finn. We know some people are like, well, she's the reason why, whatever. But she saved Finn when he was trying to sacrifice himself, and she has the line that I still love that line. We don't win by fighting what we hate. We win by fighting for what we love. Or something to that effect. And that line is incredible. And I think that her character in this movie was just kind of set off to the side as, like, has a quip here and there when they're planning stuff in and I'm like, that's...
And she still has the same optimism that she delivers in that line. But yeah, it's... Yeah.
It was very frustrating, especially because they brought in...
They take all the wind out of that sail.
Yeah, and like, they brought in 2 new female characters who I actually really enjoyed, but Kerry Russell's character, I don't remember her name, and then Jana, I liked their characters, but I was also like, that time could have been spent more. Or another criticism that I had was the Knights of Ren. What? What was their purpose?
At least we see them. I would have been more upset if we didn't see them. I was really glad that they paid that off, because that vision of them, like, super, like, highly visually stunning vision of them in the rain. They're all, like, menacing looking and crazy. Like, yeah, you want to see more of that. It did feel like another choreographed battle, like the Supreme Leader Snoke battle. That was my feeling of, like, oh, that's what this is in this movie.
Yeah, I felt like the time that was spent with the Knights of Ren, and actually someone I talked to today, my friend Alyssa, if you're watching, she's the one who kind of brought this to the forefront, because I had felt the same way, but she said it really well, and I'm giving credit where credit is due, is that she said, like, that screen time could have been used for other characters, the Knights of Ren stuff. Even though, like, they're seen in the desert, and then they're seen fighting Kylo Ren, and, like, I personally felt like the fight between Kylo Ren / Ben Solo and the Knights of Ren was kind of unnecessary. Like, we get it. It's another metaphor for him, like, not being Kylo Ren anymore. But I was like, in the context of something like Kelly Marie Tran's character, Rose, that screen time could have been given to her to give her a little more fleshed out part of this story in this movie. So that's just a thought I had. But again, I still don't think that it was done poorly, like her character. I just don't think it was given the attention it deserved.
Well, big picture view, in the same way that a lot of things that bothered us about Last Jedi have been retconned now to maybe hit a little bit better and hit a little bit more of a pleasant note. I don't think that Rose is going anywhere. I don't think Finn is going anywhere. I don't think Rey is going anywhere from our cinematic enjoyment. So I think that they can bring them back in future things. It just won't
Possibly.
be. It won't be a Skywalker saga in the sense of how we know it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I agree, but it's like you can only do so many things in a movie, and for a movie whose pace was so high octane already, like it was very fast paced, going through all these different things. If they had been bouncing around through characters even more, I mean, at the sacrifice of certain things that maybe matter a little bit less, I get, but bouncing around even more would have made it less coherent. Mm-hmm. And you never know how much extra stuff they filmed that we'll get to see on Disney Plus in 3 months.
Fair. Any other criticisms? Any other things that you didn't enjoy? I have a couple smaller ones now, but
not huge ones. No, I mean the Hux being the spy was a little bit convenient. I think I would have wished for maybe a little bit more of like a surprise. I don't know who that would have been or how that would have played out, but it was like a little bit convenient. I didn't love his performance compared to the last 2 movies, actually. And one thing I noticed is that this movie seemed like the most serious.
Definitely.
It just didn't have the same like quirky, silly humor that we've seen throughout. Really throughout.
Babu Frick was the comedic.
Yeah, Babu Frick had some great comedic relief. C-3PO was brought back into being comedic relief because he really hadn't been. He had like, oh, you probably don't recognize me because of the red leg. That was the red arm. Yeah, sorry. Silver leg, red arm. And that's really it.
Yeah.
So I did appreciate that they brought some of that back, but it overall wasn't nearly as silly. Like one of my favorite lines is when Finn asks Rey if she has a cute boyfriend.
In The Force Awakens.
The Force Awakens. I love that. When Poe is waiting on hold for Hux to come onto the line. Like, I don't know if in Star Wars there's like a hold or if there's like phone operators somewhere and like the marvelous Mrs. Maisel version of Star Wars somewhere. I like to imagine that. I think that'd be funny. But yeah, there wasn't quite as much of that in this movie.
Yeah, I think the humor was just I think the humor was kind of taken. It was there, but it wasn't the same. I agree, especially after watching The Last Jedi today. I was laughing. Like there were moments I was like, "Oh, I forgot about that." Like that's a really funny line. That's a really funny scene. So
the green milk was like so over the top for Luke. Like, okay, that's what's happening.
Oh yeah. I had a couple smaller ones. Okay, so anyone who knows me knows that I have been anti Kylo Ren and Rey being a romantic thing since the dawn of time. No, that's a little dramatic, but I really truly, I personally had 2 things that I did not want to see, and both of them happened in this movie, and I still loved it. So just, that tells you how much I love this franchise. The 2 things, I did not want Rey and Kylo Ren to be romantic. Mm-hmm. That being said, I do think that their kiss was it worked. It worked very well, despite me, vehemently not wanting it. But I did enjoy it. And then I think, or I guess not enjoy it, but I accepted it. The other thing that was a little harder for me to let go of, but at the same time, today I actually sat and thought about it, and I was reflecting, and I was like, I'm really actually glad that it ended up the way it did. I did not want Rey to be a Palpatine or a Skywalker. I didn't want her to be anybody. I just wanted her to be Rey and to be somebody, because I think that message is really powerful, that you don't have to be related to this particular bloodline or family to have these sorts of powers. And that's what I loved about The Last Jedi. That little boy with the broom at the end of the movie is everything to me in that movie. The idea that this is not going to go the way you think it will is a line they say in the movie, and then they say Luke was like, the Force is not exclusive to just the Jedi, essentially. And that was I loved that. I loved that so much. And so seeing that Rey was a Palpatine, which to me was, I went in kind of expecting it. And
I remember hearing rumors of that from Force Awakens.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I mean, because it's like, oh well, is she related to the Skywalker? No. Is she related to Obi-Wan? Maybe. Is she related to Palpatine? I mean, it's like there's only so many options that you could theorize from, and then they picked one of them.
And that's why I was so like hoping and holding my breath that she wasn't actually going to be related to Palpatine, because I was like, that would be a bigger twist to me than anything, and would have followed the story of The Last Jedi a lot truer, in my opinion.
And it would have subverted all the expectations of Star Wars fans, because every Star Wars film really is about family lineage, and about the significance and the weight that family lineage brings. And then this would have broken all that, so that they could do whatever they want in the future.
Yeah.
Disney, if you need to hire me later, I'm available.
But yeah, so I was just kind of like, that was not frustrating, but I was like, okay. And then even the last line of the movie. So earlier in the film, in The Rise of Skywalker, Rey says, somebody asks her, like, Rey, and they're like, they at that festival, and they're like, and C-3PO is like, oh, she'd like to know your family name. And Rey says, like, I don't have one. I'm just Rey. And the last line of the movie is Rey.
Which that's even like a trope, because Luke asks her and she says, I'm Rey from nowhere. He says, no one's from nowhere. Rey from Jakku. Okay, that's nowhere.
That's in The Last Jedi,
Yeah, in The Last Jedi.
And
I think they do that in Force Awakens to some degree.
Yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
But I guess just playing off the whole, she's not anyone. She's no one. At the very end, when Rey gets asked by that woman on Tatooine, like, you know, who are you? And she says Rey, and she's like, just Rey, or something like that. And she's like, Rey Skywalker, because she sees Luke and Leia's like Force ghosts off in the corner or whatever. And that was a beautiful moment, and I think it really, especially knowing that Leia trained her, and Luke trained her in the ways of the Force, I think that was really, it was beautiful. Like, that's just how, I'm just going to say it. I thought the ending was beautiful. But there's a little part of me that's like, I wish she would have just said,
right?
I wish she would have just said, I'm just Rey. And I wish that's how the movie would have ended. Because we know she's got that connection to Luke and Leia, and we know that she's a Jedi, and we know all that. And I think for her to own her just Rey, like, she's like, I own me, that would have been so powerful.
Especially with Luke and Leia watching her and smiling, and then approving the fact that she holds no family lineage, that she's just herself and she's doing her thing.
Yeah, so that probably would have been the only thing. Those criticisms are the ones that I had. I think that's pretty much it. But again, in the context of this film, not one of those things hindered my ability to enjoy or love this film.
Yeah.
So let's transition to talk about the things we loved, because this is where it's exciting. All right. Some people may say it's fan service. I thought they did a really great job of bringing back characters, tying up storylines. We cried together.
Well, let's define fan service here, because how else do you service the story without servicing the fans?
Yes,
and
I'm just quoting other people.
Okay.
I don't think it's fan servicey.
Because I also don't, but I don't know how they could. I don't know how you could define this in any other way without, like, oh, and then teenage George Lucas woke up and it was all a dream, would have been the only subversion that, like, really would not be fan service.
Yeah. Well, I think they just did a really good job tying up storylines. Aaron and I both did cry a couple of times, which I feel like if you didn't, like, get teary-eyed at the least, like, who are you?
What was your favorite, like, emotional scene?
Oh, my favorite. Okay, I've got a few. My favorite scene in the entire movie, we're gonna start with that, is the scene between Han Solo and Ben. That scene was everything. It was so well done. The dialogue, the visuals, the acting, the connection between the actors, like, I felt everything they wanted me to feel in that scene. And I think it was an absolutely perfect way to end Kylo Ren and begin Ben Solo, and to tie the previous films together. in a way, because Kylo Ren's character arc, is really truly like the heart of these films.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, and that's why I thought that The Rise of Skywalker would have been and could have been and maybe should have been really focused on Kylo Ren, Ben. But that's a whole nother thing. But I guess that was my favorite scene, and I cried.
I don't think it wasn't.
Yeah, no.
I just think that it could have multiple interpretations, which is why.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, but that was my favorite scene. I cried a lot there.
Yeah.
What about you?
I agree. That was probably the strongest emotional scene. In particular, the bit of dialogue that is best is that
So good.
is that Ben sort of has the realization, he's seeing a memory of his father. He's reckoning with his past. He's reckoning with what he sort of feels is right, feels what is wrong, and just looks at him and says, "Dad, ... And Han Solo's response is, "I know." And amazing delivery, because you have this payoff of, oh, Leia says, "I love you," before Han's put in carbonite, and his written in the script response is, "I love you too." Harrison Ford says, "I know," because that's the most Han Solo thing that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have this same moment where you have, "Dad, I know." The subtext is Kylo Ren can't even bring himself to say "I love you" to his dad, who he's killed, but it's okay.
And he says, "I know," because he knows.
Because he knows.
It was just so good, and also pleasantly surprised to see Harrison Ford back.
Yeah.
That was payoff for me.
But in the same way that really the first 6 films is like the arc of Anakin Skywalker from kind of like a slave on a desert planet into a tyrant, into a redeemed character who has saved the galaxy, or so we thought. But no, that really like saves the galaxy and ends a war. You have the same thing in these last 3 movies, where it's sort of this dark character who started light. This character who had everything going for him, went to the dark side, and then is redeemed in the end, and is able to contribute to the end of a war.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in that sense, this is very, very reflective storytelling, and it is really the same thing. But the way that they do it, I think they took all the good parts of how Anakin's character was interesting and conflicted internally, and they were able to like polish off some of the harsh edges and really give compelling, fun, enjoyable, and emotional storytelling.
Yeah.
It was really, really good.
Yeah.
And it paid off in the end, and the way in which it ends of him and his mother becoming one with the Force at the same time, I think that has like tremendous payoff, and I really liked that. And I didn't mind that there was the emotional linkage between him and Rey, because they introduced sort of this new characteristic of the Force, which is a dyad of the Force. And so dyad? Oh, dyad, okay. A dyad of the Force, which basically means that these two people are intrinsically connected in such a fundamental way that it has like unprecedented power. We've never seen this in a movie before. This is super exciting to get like new canon-based like cool lore and like the mythical fantasy elements of the Force. Love that. And the fact that Palpatine is able to then manipulate that, really cool. And that added like some surprising stakes that I wasn't expecting. That's really neat. It's not something you just like, saw coming down the middle of the lane. And I thought that's what contributed to the kiss at the end.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really romantic. It was like this intrinsic connection from like an emotional level, the Force level, their shared experiences, and then like the fact that it's over and we did it. And so that was the end, and then Kylo's at peace. Yeah. That was my take on it. It wasn't like some kind of Snow White ending that I think I definitely would have feared. I actually was fearing that more so between Rey and Finn after episode 7, but then that didn't go anywhere, so I was happy with that.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, as far as like the emotions of, we talked about the scene with Han and Ben. can't talk about The Rise of Skywalker without talking about the emotional stuff with Carrie Fisher and Leia.
Yeah. They had a limited palette of what to work with.
And I think it still worked.
They did a good job with what they took original footage from Carrie Fisher. They did minimal, if any, editing of her dialogue. And when they needed to, they had a stand-in character, but it was just a body double. They didn't have her say anything. They had a little bit of action, and it pushed the story forward in a way that was honoring of the character's legacy and honoring of the woman's legacy. So,
yeah,
2 thumbs up there. I don't know how they could have done it any better.
Yeah,
really.
The 2 scenes that stick out in my head. Well, pretty much anything with her in it, but the scenes that really got me emotionally and made me cry were when they say goodbye to her. They say, like, sleep well, sweet princess, or something, and that was just, getting goosebumps, because that was just very emotional, and I think Chewie's reaction to her death.
That was big.
Oh, it was so hard to watch, and it's like, Chewie has now lost all of his friends. Well, okay, Lando. We still have Lando, but like he lost 3 of his best friends.
Well, that's what
Poor
happens.
Chewie.
That's what happens when you're 250 years old and you're friends with humans.
Anyways, but my point being that his reaction to losing Leia was, you needed that, and I think we all needed that. Especially,
we all needed to do that. We all needed to scream out like a Wookiee and fall to our knees at that point.
It was very emotional, and it connected, I think, with me personally very well. I also think that other scenes that made me cry, when Chewie got his medal, he finally got it, and it was Maz that gave it to him. Wrecked me, because she says, this is for you, and he's just like, just Chewie. We brought Chewie out for this because I think Chewie just needs some love. So we brought out our little Chewie. But yeah, I think the emotions in this movie, I think, interchanged with the humor that is typically a part of Star Wars films. This movie needed to have emotional punches to the gut, and they delivered on all fronts.
Yeah.
And so I think those were some of the things. A couple other things that we really liked. I really appreciated... Sorry, I'm talking with my hand over my mouth. I really appreciated Dio, the new droid.
Voiced by J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, I think I really, really liked his, the way he interacted with people because... Well, it's kind of sad because you find out, or it's alluded that he was not treated well by humans. Yeah,
he's like an abused cat.
Well,
that was my take on it.
It's also really interesting because the whole movie, Poe is just beating up on C-3PO and just calling him names and just be nice.
I mean, but that's Han Solo.
Yeah, I know. But I'm saying it was just this weird parallel between how droids are treated in the Star Wars universe.
We don't serve their kind.
Yeah. But I like Dio. I thought that was a really cute addition, especially that he spoke English, and because a lot of the newer droids that we've seen, well, I guess not, because K2S
protocol droids and security droids, humanoid ones speak English typically, but any non-humanoid doesn't normally speak English, so that was kind of cool to see. I realized that I thought it was weird, and I was like, no, a lot of droids speak English. Just not ones with traffic cone shaped heads. Yeah.
But I liked his character. The scene where BB-8 gets stuck under a tree, that is a mood. That is me 100% of my life. He's just I'm here. Can you help me, please? I'm under a tree. Just somebody help me. I'm happy, but I'm under a tree. Just help me. That for me was that's me. That's all you need to know about Marissa Moore right there. So that was a thing that I really enjoyed. I loved Lando's role in this movie. I think he could have been sort of really super side character, but I think that the way that they brought him in to be this sort of I was actually with Luke while he was on this mission to get this Wayfinder, blah, blah, blah. I think that was really well done. I think it was kind of a cool way to integrate him back into the story, and kind of lets us know that Lando has still been, because they announced him as general,
Yep.
So he's still like.
Yeah, he was a general in Return of
No,
the Jedi.
I know that, but I'm saying we haven't seen him since then. I mean, if you count Solo, but I think it was just really well done that they brought him back in. But my favorite thing about Lando being in the movie is the conversation he has with Poe. Because Poe, and I think that's another thing that kind of got skimmed over, but I was thinking about it, is like, in The Last Jedi, because like in Force Awakens, Poe is like a hotshot pilot and he knows everything, and then The Last Jedi, it's really him coming to terms with like leadership, and he feels like torn between, is he ready? And then this movie really confronts him with that, like,
it puts it
Leia,
on his plate.
yeah, Leia passes, and now he's in charge, and like, is he ready? And he's really dealing with that, like he is even talking to Leia's corpse about it. And so I think that the line that Lando gives to him about like, none of us were ready, we just did what we could, or basically something to that effect.
Yeah.
That was a line I really enjoyed. And I really I love Lando. Obviously, we named one of our dogs after him. Also, the Ewoks. I was like, stop it! They had their little cameo, and I was like, oh my gosh, we got it all.
Yeah.
Like, so in the idea of being fan servicey, those are the types of things that some people would be like, oh god, and I'm like, I loved it. Like, we got to see Ewoks again. Like, that was wonderful, and it was just a quick little blip, but it was everything we needed.
Do you want to
and
know?
The porgs. You got to see porgs again, which was nice.
The ultra detailed fan service of the Ewoks is that there was enormous backlash when they digitally added eyelids to the Ewoks, and the Ewoks in this film did not blink.
Yeah. True.
That was a detail I noticed.
Anything else you enjoyed?
Things I enjoyed. There's so many things. John Williams got to be in this movie.
My best friend John Williams had a cameo!
John Williams,
I was going to bring that up, but
yeah.
okay, yes.
That was tremendous.
He was precious! With his little helmet and his eye patch.
One of my favorite vehicles, Red 5's X-Wing, got to be in this film, which I was really excited for. I really appreciated and had really fun nostalgia trip when they had all the voices of the previous Jedi speak.
Yes.
That was really fun.
Obviously, we were going to talk about that.
The creature work that they did, Babu Frick, as just the way they designed him.
Perfect Star Wars character.
Really, really fun, funny. And we haven't had a lot of tiny characters like that are creatures and not droids. Yeah, really fun. Kerry Russell's character as kind of a mix between Boba Fett and the Rocketeer, where she's a little bit mysterious. You don't see her full face. You don't get her whole backstory. She's really cool and compelling, and Poe doesn't really get his way, and I think that's really cool too. That there's this sort of longing that you get from a main character. That was really
going back really quickly to the voices, because I think that's something that a lot of people have said they really enjoyed.
Yeah.
You had everybody. They called in the cavalry.
Yeah.
With this, everyone, and the thing I loved is that they included from the extended universe, that to me was really cool, a really good payoff. For anyone that's been a fan, especially outside of the main movies, arguably and admittedly, I haven't watched a lot of the extended stuff.
But the cartoon series.
Yeah, cartoons and stuff like that. I haven't truly. It's something that I've always I just haven't. So I'm just admitting that now.
We have them on Disney Plus.
I know.
Streaming now.
But my point being that I still appreciated it. I was still able to sit there and be like, oh, that's that person, and it got the more voices I heard, the more I was like, wow, they really decided to do this, and that was really cool.
Well, and in the scene with the Vision in The Force Awakens, they have Alec Guinness, a line that Alec Guinness delivers, and they cut part of a word off to make it say Rey. So you actually have him delivering the line to Rey, which is really cool. But they had, Liam Neeson, they had a couple of Yoda, delivery of lines
Actually,
from Yoda.
Exxon was in there.
Yep, she was in it. Freddie Prinze Jr. was in it, which I only took point to notice because he talked poorly on Star Wars publicly, on a radio show. So I thought
No, he didn't talk poorly on Star Wars. He talked poorly on Star Wars fans.
Oh, okay.
On the fans that were being crappy.
Yeah.
That's what he was talking about.
Okay.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, really, and of course they had Luke. They had, I think they had Sam Jackson.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
he was in there.
yeah.
It was good. It was a
really
really cool way to bring everything together.
Yep.
Really enjoyed.
What'd you think of Rey having her own lightsaber?
I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Going along the lines, I guess, to talk about like Leia having a lightsaber.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting. I wish that there had been more time maybe spent on that.
Of her training.
Her training. Well,
Yeah.
even like her training, but also just
She beats the heck out of Luke.
yeah.
She knocks him out.
Well, I guess that. Oh, and I guess kind of talking about. There was a scene where they did like a digital age alteration, CGI, whatever you want to call it, of young Luke and young Leia training together.
Yeah. The face looked like the face at the end of Rogue One.
It looked better, but
but
it was
in the dark. That's why it looked better.
I was a little torn because J.J. Abrams, I had seen in an interview, said that they did not do any of that. That they did not like CGI her. They did not, and I was like. But you kind of did because
I don't think that's what he's talking about.
Yes, it's different, but it's still a.
They aren't trying to represent late Carrie Fisher. They're trying to represent this, like, in my opinion, the character from Rogue One that looks a lot like Carrie Fisher, but isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, and then other couple things. I'm trying to.
The duels were excellent.
Yes, the lightsaber battles in this movie.
Really excellent.
When she gets both those lightsabers and just the Palpatine, I was like, yes.
Oh, I think the one on the wreckage in the rain,
when she stabs Kylo Ren.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Oh, had me for a minute there. I was clutching pearls.
Incredible. And then the star battles are also pretty cool, and they have this light speed jumping feature that they introduce, which really feels like something from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, very much so.
But they have it, and it's cool that it's like, oh, the Falcon is not mechanically sound to handle this thing. Mm-hmm. So, like, I don't know. I liked that characteristic.
Yeah, and kind of touching on the whole scene on the water,
on the wreckage.
I really was kind of confused, and I still have questions, and that's why I want to see it again. So Leia gave all she had left, gave her life, to connect with Ben on that, and in that moment. And she connects with him at the very moment that Rey stabs him. And then they have, and I guess we should talk about...
to cause pause enough so that Rey could stab him.
Yes. Well, no, I think she's trying to connect with him to, like, get him...
Yeah, and he, like, pauses, he, like, makes a... And then that's when she gets the blade.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So, but my point being that I'm still confused because, like, she stayed in her corpse state the whole rest of the movie until Ben actually dies. Mm-hmm. So was she, like, inhabiting his body the whole time? And that's why she didn't disappear immediately? Because, like, we saw in The Last Jedi and in A New Hope, when a Jedi dies...
Return of the Jedi, yeah.
When a Jedi dies, they just poof.
Well, I think...
like, it's not like it's a day or week or whatever. They, like, immediately poof, and their clothes fall to the floor. Like, so we know that's a thing. So I was kind of like... it didn't occur to me until they panned to show her disappearing after Ben actually dies. I was like...
Making a stretch of an explanation, I think that it's when a Jedi becomes one with the Force, they disappear and leave their robes behind. But if you think of, like, all the kills in Order 66, like, they just fall to the ground and they're just there.
Okay.
And maybe that's because they have conflict that they have to work through, whatever. I don't know. That's, like, a very short answer that justifies that, but I don't really know. Because that's a good point.
It was like...
Maybe it's just editing, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No. And I didn't... It's not that I disliked it. I just was trying to understand it more. So I definitely want to see the movie again to understand that a little better, maybe. I appreciated... Oh, so... And then in the story, of course, we learn about... And not learn about, but we kind of see it really take hold, the life force, which, you know, Baby Yoda gave us recently. Mm-hmm. But being able to heal somebody and really being able to inhabit or, like, give them part of your life. So that becomes a really big thing in this movie. Like, she heals the sand snake thing, and then she heals Kylo Ren, and then Kylo Ren heals or she heals Kylo Ren twice, right?
No, she heals.
No, she heals.
She heals
She
the
heals
lightsaber.
his stab, and then he saves her life. There's a lot of life force giving in this movie.
Yeah, they introduce the ability when Rey heals this like sand serpent thing that they run across, which also great creature design. I thought that looked really really
absolutely
cool.
Awesome.
It looked like something that Jabba the Hutt wishes he had.
Yeah,
like really cool. And then they have her heal Kylo, and then Ben Solo, when he's been redeemed, brings her back from being basically wiped of life force because she takes all of her last energy to defeat the Emperor.
Yeah.
And then in passing that along, that's where he's now out of his life force. And so I guess that's kind of maybe that's the answer to like the disappearing thing, that Leia's body was done, but her life force wasn't done.
Was within.
Was
Ben.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Something like that.
All the more reason to watch it again.
Yeah.
I also really quickly just want to talk briefly about just the visuals in this movie, because they were incredible.
Wow.
I'm gonna say this one had the best visuals of, to me, the whole trilogy. The scene that, like, I closed my eyes and I could still see it, and it's incredible. It's like the first scene in the movie. It's where Kylo Ren gets to Exelon. That's how you say it, right? I always feel like I'm saying an oil company. But he gets to Exelon, and
Exelon Mobil.
He like gets out of his ship, and he's walking, and it like pans, and there's this giant floating temple thing that's like this far off the ground, and it's just the way the camera panned with him, and I can see it. It like follows him, swivels, pans under. It was, oh my god, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And the colors and just all the lighting in this movie was perfect to me. I never felt like, people talk about Marvel movies being washed out, and I'm like, I never felt that in this movie. Like, colors were vibrant when they needed to be. Things were muted when they needed to be. I really loved the scene too where, because Rey and Kylo continue this like forced chat thing, and the scene where Rey is on the
on the Star Destroyer.
Star Destroyer, is it the Star Destroyer? Where she's in the White Room.
She's in his quarters.
Yes,
on the
on
ship.
the Star Destroyer. Okay, so she's in that room, and she knocks or they like both go to fight, and they hit Darth Vader's helmet, and that's when he finds out where she is. But that like stark contrast of her in that white room and him out in the snow, and like that whole, I don't know, I loved it all. It was just so good.
And then how about the very last scene where you have the Tatooine binary sunset payoff?
Beautiful.
And then very subtly they have a small red sun on top of a larger yellow sun in the shape of BB-8, and you see BB-8 in the foreground. I thought that was really cool.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I will say, I wish I got a little more R2 in this movie. And, we didn't even talk about C-3PO real quick. Okay, so C-3PO being all sacrificial and saving his friends and going Sith for a second there, that was really very noble of him, and I appreciated it. And I love C-3PO, and I love his like clumsiness and his like C-3PO, human cyborg relations. Like, I just loved it.
And the idea that like you could update C-3PO.
And the idea that R2 was his best friend and they said it to each other was like, and then that his best friend was the one that like rebooted his memory. Precious. Love it. Oh, so good.
And they kind of trash talk each other because he's like, R2's backups have been known to be unreliable.
Yeah. It was good. So overall, we really, really enjoyed this movie, if you couldn't tell. It was everything as Star Wars fans I think we wanted and more. So, this has been our movie recap discussion of The Rise of Skywalker.
Comment down below what you think is going to come after this movie. I'd be really interested to see if you think that they're going to do brand new stories, if they're going to explore, the outer rim, extended reaches of the galaxy, or maybe they're just going to continue on with Poe, Rey, and Finn. We'll see.
Yeah, comment your favorite characters, your favorite scenes, things you liked, things you didn't. We want to know. So
let's hear it.
Thanks for watching our movie recap of The Rise of Skywalker. We did it.
We did it.
And may the Force be with you.
Always.